You are listening to the Intelligent Vocalist Podcast, episode 85.
Welcome to the Intelligent Vocalist with John Henny. This is the podcast dedicated to help you be a smarter, better, more informed singer. And now, your host for the Intelligent Vocalist, John Henny.
Hey there, this is John Henny. Welcome back to another edition of the Intelligent Vocalist. I do so appreciate you spending your precious time with me. All right, episode 85. So I've decided to celebrate episode 85 because no one ever celebrates 85. It's always 50 or 100. So we're going to celebrate episode 85 by doing a couple of things. First, I'm going to start releasing 2 podcasts a week. Yep, the podcast has been getting more and more popular. Had growth of over 25% this past month. So something's catching on here. It's pretty exciting. So I'm going to see if people are up for me 2 times a week. So my plan is to release on Tuesdays and Fridays. And if it seems like people like it, I will continue to do it. If it just turns into kind of overwhelm and a chore for people to keep listening and the numbers drop, then I'll have to reconsider. But I'm going to also make things a bit more interesting, which comes to the number 2 way to celebrate. I have my first guest. Going to start bringing guests on here and there rather than just having it be me. Going to do a back and forth. So they talk about in the podcast industry, if you will, there's the Robinson Crusoe type of podcast, which I have been doing, just me on my lonesome little desert island. And then there's the Oprah style where you interview people. Now, I can't give everyone in the audience a free car, but I can come up with some interesting questions. So in that sense, I can kind of be Oprah, except for the billions of dollars in worldwide audience. And I am very excited to have as my first guest, I actually really am excited, Chris Johnson. Chris and I go back a long ways. We touch a bit on that in the interview, but I find Chris to just be an amazingly smart and gifted voice teacher who's always finding new ways of doing things without any conceit or attitude. And he has a beautiful way of making complex things simple. And that's something I really, really appreciate. And to me is the sign of a great educator, to take complex ideas and make them easier to understand. Now, in doing my first interview, you would think that I would hedge my bets and take it easy on the technology. But of course, no. I decided to try and do a Facebook Live on my computer with new software at the same time as I was talking to Chris, and suddenly I couldn't get audio on him in the Facebook Live. It was a bit of a mess. So I've managed to salvage the podcast out of it. Luckily enough, Chris was recording on his end, which is actually better. His audio is nice and crisp and clear. Yeah, you can still hear me. It's just not as clear as Chris, but that's when you're doing these long distance podcasts, that's something you do give up, a little bit of the audio quality. Chris being in the UK, he teaches in London. What we discuss in the show notes to reach out to Chris and to find out information, it will be in the show notes at johnhenny.com/85, episode number 85. So you can go there and I will put the links in the show notes. So without further ado, I present my first guest, Chris Johnson. So Chris, welcome. Thank you for coming on.
Thanks for having me, man. I appreciate the invite.
Yeah, it's great to talk to you. I know we go back a ways.
A ways, yeah. You and there's a couple of people who are literally as you would read in some of those books about people who have done really great things in a lifetime. You need somebody who ignites the the fire, who starts it off for you. And you're certainly one of those people for me, right at the start of my teaching career. So, and that was 12 years ago or something like that.
Oh my goodness.
So it's been a while. I've got a few photos with you, mate.
Yeah. I mean, I remember meeting you and Steve Giles, who's your co-host on the Naked Vocalist podcast, which everyone needs to listen to. You guys do a great job.
Thank you.
Yeah, I remember just being really impressed with both of you, and now you've both become like smarter about this stuff than me, which just pisses me off. To be honest.
I mean, I'm pretty smart. I am. Yeah, I am. But yeah, those days were great. And then what you did, you came down to Southampton.
Yep.
And you, which were really the good old days with the teachers down there, where we used to just sit in that hot studio, Gareth's hot, muggy studio.
Well, it's the UK version of hot.
Yeah, right, yeah. What am I saying to you when it's like on Labor Day? Your Facebook status on Labor Day is like, fuck, like, I'm melting. So sitting in that muggy room. But the beauty of it was we did that a lot with a lot of teachers and ourselves. But sort of sitting on all those sofas, somebody on the piano, an excited student in front of the piano, and then just running lesson after lesson with discoveries and all kinds of stuff. And that was not a lot of teachers, I think, get to experience that. It's very much a nice to have. And so I'm super thankful for those times when we did that. And obviously there was a time when you were with us for like, I think 2 or 3 days or something. And that was, my first experience of observing a teacher and then taking that information away and going, all right, how am I going to do this? Like, I'm going to do everything John did. And then it wouldn't be as good. And I'm like, hey, listen, I'm using all the same stuff. What's going on? What's going on? And it's like, then what you start to realize is it's not about the exercise. It's about how you communicate. And that's when I think back to the time when we first met each other and I was observing what you were using a very narrow set of tools, but getting these wonderful results. I take those tools away, terrible results, right? But it was
I think it's just the experience of it now, because one of the things I'd like to just chat with you briefly about, but I think I've had people ask about this, and I think it's rather fascinating, is you've moved from Southampton, then you were in London for a while, obviously very competitive market.
Yeah.
And now you've moved to Brighton.
Yeah, I still teach in London though. Okay, but
you've had to reestablish yourself. So do you teach in Brighton?
A little bit, but do you know what? The establishment, or not the establishment, that sounds like, I don't want to get into the establishment.
Right.
Not this time of the century. But I established myself, ended up establishing this online. So it was almost like Salisbury, which is a tiny little town near Stonehenge.
Yep.
It was establishing there, then Southampton, then London, which was actually a very scary move. And then after that, it was like, I do a little bit in Brighton, but I actually ended up establishing myself online anyway, internationally. So they've been the kind of the worlds where I've had to breach into different environments.
So great. So my question to you is, what do you feel when you decide to establish yourself in a new area, a new market, what is it that you do? What has been really helpful for you to create that authority and establish yourself and rise above all of the noise? Yeah,
well, you know what? I can't lie. Part of it is playing the Google game.
Yep.
Because when you do your keyword research, if anyone starts to yawn right now, just tune out. But keyword research is very valuable, because what you do is you end up figuring out obviously what people are typing into Google and where they're typing it from and all that stuff. Mm-hmm. So you do that, and then you realize, then you look on Google, you search those terms, and you see the quality of the websites that are competing for that. And you realize, no offense to you guys, but your websites are absolutely diabolical. Mm-hmm. I just have to invest not even £300-400 in an average design, with a video that portrays my personality and I've already trumped everyone in like 12 months, right?
Yeah.
And that's not that I could be terrible at my job, right? But I have got you in the door. And, but fortunately, I'd like to think that because people stick around, I'm reasonably good at my job. So retention is not that hard, really, even when you're expensive, because what you do is that people see your value and they want to invest in it. So if it's difficult to get those people through the door with that initial thing, then that's tricky. But then obviously give it 12 months of Google searches, then it becomes very much more about recommendation because now you're known. But another part of it that I think is important is singing coaching is very insular. It's very lonely. And it's actually a little bit insidious with the competitiveness at times, needlessly, because there's plenty for everyone. But that means that the integration of teachers actually gets stuck. I feel like teachers don't integrate until they feel secure enough to go, oh, you're not going to steal my clients. Or actually, I'm not worried even if you do, but try. Because that actually... every success I've made in my life has been down to somebody else. But if I'm easy to work with and I can do a good job, obviously people will recommend me, not just students, but professional people will recommend me. And that's, again, massive to being successful in a new area. You integrate to the professional community as well as the one you're serving.
Yeah. And I think you make a great point. The first being, when you're coming into a new area to establish yourself, voice teachers, we seem to have this aversion for self-promotion or certainly advertising. And there's kind of this belief of voice teachers will brag, I don't advertise. And I always respond, well, then you've been in the same location a very long time.
Yeah.
Because nobody has moved to a new area and a month later is bragging they don't advertise and they have a full studio.
No. And there's usually a backstory there in terms of, and I've worked at the same institution.
Correct.
And then every cohort has left that, but 20% of them have stayed working with me for the next 5 years. Like, I mean, that's happened to me as well. So there is a backstory there. So yeah, you're right. It's that you wouldn't certainly see that from your new age teacher. Not often anyway.
But what that does is it creates an environment, like you said, where the websites are poor, the advertising is non-existent, or it's not done with the potential customer in mind. And I think, and we'll move on to today's topic, but voice teachers, if I could just give you one tip, and I believe that Chris would agree, is the mistake I see is on the website, the teacher makes it about themselves. Who they've taught, where they've studied, maybe what institutions they've gone, degrees they've got, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah. And very little to nothing about how they can solve a singer's problem.
Yeah, they don't speak to that person who's in that pickle. And some people don't know who it is you're talking about. Like they're like Royal Academy of, and if in the UK, if it's Royal, people go, "Ooh, cool," or they might go, "Bit traditional," right? Rather than you speak to, because that also saying where you've gone is almost a pigeonhole. Rather than, it doesn't matter where I've gone, I can help you. And you, like classical and contemporary, or I could, it doesn't matter because the skills are related to your voice. So, it's a strange marketing world out there, and it doesn't make it difficult actually for someone breaking into the market, and that's why I'm quite encouraging of the teachers I train to just say, look, get some video content on, get people to trust you, speak to them, not your peers, and then you're going to be rocking.
And for the singers who listen to the podcast, it's helpful for them. If you have a particular issue that you feel that you want needs solved, a bit of investigation, if you find a voice teacher who really speaks to that issue, that may be the person to try.
100%. And that might say that
focus on helping
myself down, but hey.
Yep, absolutely. So today's theme is how to know what to work on. And I kind of come at this because I read this book called The One Thing. And it's this great book about finding something that the one thing that you should be working on to meet your goal. But then that becomes like putting the proverbial bell on the cat. How do I find that one thing?
Yeah.
And I find in today's information society that it's the glut of information that really paralyzes singers. And it's paralysis by analysis. They just get stuck. They don't know what to work on. And so if you just, for the average singer, how do you help them work through the clutter and just get clear on just focusing on one thing rather than flitting around to 20 different others?
Yeah. What you said about the information overload there is massive, because actually almost every exercise you read has value applied in the right way to the right situation. Which is why reading an arbitrary exercise to say, do that every day and your voice will change, is such a load of rubbish. Because no exercise has that kind of worth. Not really. Maybe like straw seems to do something so intrinsic, it changes things so intrinsically. That's almost like a part exception to this rule. But it doesn't teach you anything about how to sing. It just changes things so dramatically that you just kind of go, oh, I'm going to do it every day there, right? So don't get me wrong, I love the straw. I think it's wicked. But yeah, so you have all of these exercises. And so what I tend to do with the singers that I see, and admittedly, my sort of view of this situation is related to the people that I work with, right? And I work with people who are like, my voice is a pain in the ass. It's not doing what I need it to do, or I'm crashing and burning in my professional career, right? So they're like, that's like 90% of my day.
Yep.
So I'm driven to that goal of trying to get that singer to resolve that problem as quickly as possible and as permanently as possible. No patchwork, right? So that's my bias on that side of things. So what I tend to do with those singers is I tend to walk them through a bunch of diagnostic principles, which are to show them how their voice functions on certain levels, right? For instance, breathing would be one of them. Mm-hmm. Could have like, one of them that I use is really handy. People can pick this up. It's used in speech therapy. It's the S to Z ratio, for example. And what they tend to find is...
Now, for us American listeners, Z is not the name of a space alien. It's the letter Z.
Hey, and this is, I'm singing with these American toys to my daughter, and it's like X, Y, Z. And I have to learn how to say that because I keep saying Z, Z, what am I saying? Now, and then I even forget which order the letters are in occasionally. What? What? I'm saying to myself, what am I doing? I live in language, right?
Yeah. So it's great. Yeah, just my father was from Glasgow, and he was here in the States, and he was complaining to someone about they didn't fix the fridge properly, and my dad's just giving off in his thick Glaswegian accent, and the guy goes, "Why don't you learn to speak English?" Who do you think invented the bloody language?
Oh my God, yeah, and that's what.
Remember where English comes from?
Yeah, right.
English would be England,
and I'm Scottish, so off. So yeah, this S to Z ratio, right? Because a lot of people are like, well, I need to work on my breathing. You know what it's like. I need to work on my breathing.
Yep.
Sometimes you do, right? Fair enough. But what you tend to do, and they're always like, I run out of breath. I just don't think I can get enough in me. And what you get is you do the hiss, and the hiss is one of those exercises that is prescribed with no purpose, right? So people do it, and they're like, A, I don't know what I'm doing, so I don't buy into it. B, I honestly cannot see how this is going to change anything, right? But in context of a Z, it actually makes a lot of sense, right? Which is why the singer can have a revelation. Is what we do this big hiss. The hiss will last. I've had somebody go nearly 2 minutes. I'm like, hey, are you a pearl diver? what the heck is this? But they have a very long hiss. And I'm like, I don't put any ideas in their head straight away. I'm like, okay, what we're going to do is once they've recovered, right, let's have a cup of tea. And then we'll do this.
Paramedic standing by.
Yeah. And so we'll do a Z instead. And obviously it's guided to be pretty quiet, right? And what that does is it kind of puts a new challenge on that. So it's the same amount of lung volume. It's the same like enormous breath in. And like the hiss, it's very much trying to control that outflow to keep an even sound. So first one hiss, next one was a Z. And then what you get is a hiss that lasts a minute or 45 seconds. You add a bit of voice to it, goes down to 15 seconds, right? And then you're like, and they're like, I start putting the ideas in their head, like, you can hiss for 45 seconds. Now, how do you think it's possible that we're running out of breath on a 5-second phrase? And then we start talking about it. And then I'm like, look, we put voice in the way. And then I let them know, like, the vocal folds kind of resist the air. They regulate what comes through to a massive degree. So in that sense, then, if we put them in the way and we get like half your time, then what we're seeing is not rather a breathing issue, but actually how breath and voice are in synergy. And that voice might be tight or injured even, or inflamed or just untrained. And they need so much pressure to phonate. And then they leak some as well. So you get like this kind of, this kind of sounds. That you see actually the inefficiency is when it meets the vocal folds. It's not your breathing per se. It's actually the breath interacting with the vocal folds, in which case that singer can go, all right, I'll put all those breathing exercises down from the internet. And what I might do is actually look at vocal folds coming together and how that interacts with breath.
So you're talking about using this hiss versus Z as a diagnostic.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, and that allows that singer to go, what do I work on? I know the symptom, I run out of breath.
Yeah.
So I look at the exact correlative place where that comes from, which is my lungs or my breathing system. And I just basically go, oh, well, that makes perfect sense. But they do loads of exercises and nothing changes. Now, if you were to get you get a hiss that's like 20 seconds, that is a short time for a hiss, really. Yep. And then what you get is a Z that lasts the same amount of time. And then what you can say is actually, with the air that you have, those vocal folds are being efficient with it. It's the same time. They're not leaking any more air. They're not inefficient. Otherwise, that time would be half or whatever. It would be a much lower ratio. So what you
do this on just a comfortable pitch?
Yeah, somewhere. If it's too low, I find it's too slack. If it's too low, so it's somewhere like, for guys, I reckon you could probably do it somewhere around about F or G.
Okay.
And for females, maybe somewhere around like C or D or B or C.
Okay, and this is for guys. It's the F or G below middle C.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay.
Yeah. And so then and
middle C for women, C or D.
Yeah, middle C for women, about there. No higher, because we start challenging the registers and stuff, right? Or the transition. So so we get that situation, and then we're like, right. So then I would go, look, your breathing hiss is the same as your Z, which that means the sound that's being created from that air is actually quite efficient. Now, that time, to put it in context, 20 seconds is relatively short. It's quite a low lung volume. Yep. Now, then I'm like, okay, look back at those breathing exercises, because this is about expanding your lung volume, and it is about creating more space. And maybe that is related to posture, because posture inhibits space in the lungs and stuff. So then we have that ratio, and that can absolutely change the course of everything that you do for 6 months. So that's one very small and incredibly useful example of knowing how a system works and challenging two different sides of it to give you some incredibly valuable information. And that's where I find my coaching's gone, because I think the medical profession would agree that diagnosis is, and I've heard this from other pedagogues as well, is the least effective part of treatment is diagnosis. How many people get treated for stuff and it didn't work? They had to go back and back and back. And doctors do loads of tests, right? So singing teachers or singers themselves quite often only do one and make a choice based on that, which I find is like, it can be hit and miss. So I think the more you can try and prove your own initial thought wrong, listen to a sing and make a judgment. Don't go on the judgment, prove it wrong. And if you can't prove it wrong after a couple of goes, without trying to like kind of sabotage it in the back of your mind, then you can actually be, well, my instincts are excellent, right? So well done. But you can go forward confidently, but having that guess become reality for you and it being a true guess after you tested it out, that also could make someone a bit too egotistical, and then they'll just guess from then on. They got 3 rights. They're like, I don't need to prove myself wrong anymore. But you do every time. You do, because you will discover that there's a few cracks in the theory that make a massive difference when you've gone 6 months into training. When it's a bit like a ship that's on course. If it's 1 degree at the start, you go 1,000 miles and you're way off, right? So if we can just make sure that course that we're setting is just as defined as it can be and not a sloppy decision, then I find everyone's happier. The students, the teachers, the people who hire the singers, everything. That's what I'm really passionate about that at the moment.
That's actually that's a great point. And do you have thoughts on singers maybe working on their own voice? They're not studying with someone at the moment. How do they constantly test what it is that they're working on to know that they're on the right path? Do you have some guidelines?
Yeah, and simplistically, because I find we all know how to move our body, and moving body parts is actually a very simple thing to do, and singers really relate to it, which is great. So one short run of things that I've done in workshops before is to start up the top of the head, work down the body a little bit, sing exactly the same thing in several different body movements and note the changes. You might have to do it a couple times because quite often we don't get it, or we just need to experience it, or we need to record it and listen back, right? Crucial part of diagnosis, I find, if you're diagnosing yourself, is one of the main offenders for tension in the voice, even hoarseness, breathiness, pressed voice is the tongue, nasality, whatever. So first thing I'm like, okay, stick the tongue out, sing with the tongue out. Does it get better? Does it get worse? Because even if it gets worse, it still tells you a lot about what's going on. People are scared of getting worse, but if you remove your scaffolding, the thing that held you together, you're obviously going to fall apart. So sticking the tongue out and falling apart a bit is actually, oh, maybe it is my tongue. And then it gets better, then, oh, maybe it is my tongue, right? Or no change at all, very uncomfortable. I'm like, okay, right, maybe it's not your tongue. Who knows? But tongue is a routine offender. The next one that we do is we waggle the jaw side to side as you sing the phrase. So like, I was born by the river, like that. And so someone then gets...
So listeners should know there's a visual here, and he was indeed waggling his jaw.
So jaw left to right. And that also can generate a lot of change. And that can also change the tongue, can make the tongue relax and go along with the jaw. But also all of the muscles that connect to the jaw, the masseters and the ones underneath the suprahyoids, they can get waggled into looseness. So then we go down, so that's the jaw. Then we go to turning the head left and right, which loosens the muscles that scaffold the larynx and the neck at times, like the SCMs and all the other ones that would become flexible by turning the head. If someone holds their breath or presses their voice, that tends to really put them off. And so you can discover a lot about how you might hold things together at the neck when you turn your head, and it gets better. Next is shoulders, right below that. So alternately rolling the shoulders brings the upper ribs into motion, and it can just create that sort of beginnings of postural balance in the body. And again, people start to feel really good. That refers up the neck as well. So there's a kind of connection there. It might also help the neck. Then we rotate at the waist. So it's like swaying. Then you sing with your arms in the air. That is a big one, by the way. So many people suddenly go, oh my God, this is ridiculous. That would signify that the rib cage and the posture is a little slumped, and there's a lack of room. Also, singers, this is very inspiratory position. So if someone's very pushy, which is very much expiration, then this opposes it by creating an inspiratory position. So you balance it out, and then you get much easier subglottal pressure. And then the last one that I do is bending at the waist, which is the opposite to putting your hands in the air. So if a singer sounds very low energy, then when you bend at the waist, basically like you're about to do a deadlift, that puts your belly into this very much like get airflow out situation, and some voices improve in that way as well. So with that thing going down the body, if each singer would try that, when they have a breathy voice, they might be looking at registers, but actually when they turn their head, it all cleans up. So actually the vocal fold closure is possibly being inhibited by external influences that are just not allowing vocal fold closure to be complete.
See, this to me is fascinating because you've found a very direct way to approach mind-body awareness, which is a key skill for singers, but that not everyone naturally has. Not everybody connects to sensations in the body the same.
Yeah.
And so this, to me, this makes sense as it forces the issue. And it brings that direct awareness by just focusing on one part of the body. Now, how do people find out more about this? You had mentioned to me you have a workshop coming up?
Yeah, in London, and this is primarily for vocal coaches, but I will be scheduling one for singers later on in the year. So the first one for vocal coaches on the 30th of June in London. But it's getting oversubscribed, which is excellent. So I'm probably going to be in quick succession doing an overflow one. And in that workshop, I'm covering, you can see that workshop, by the way, on my Facebook page, which is / Chris Johnson Vocal Coach. It's right at the top.
Great. And I'll put a link in the show notes.
Lovely. Yeah, that's great. Thanks, man. And that's going to go through an entire set of diagnostic tools, not all of which you have to apply in the same lesson, because that'd be a bloody long lesson. But when you have inklings and you want to try and challenge your initial diagnosis, that's what that workshop's going to teach you. But I find with the vocal coach issue, what the workshops also aim to do is to try and get the guesswork out of diagnosis, because that's what you find when you work with teachers. It's difficult to diagnose, and it is very much a guess. That's fair enough, because actually what we end up doing after the diagnosis is it just gives us our very best guess based on the things we ruled out, right? So it's not even 100%. But our guesses are based on our biases, and our biases are numerous, even for the people who feel impartial. We'll go twang, just add twang. Twang, twang, twang. Or breathing. Everyone's breathing this week. What is it with this breathing? And then it'd be like, oh, and then I'll be like, oh yeah, isn't it? And then they're like, yeah. And I went to a breathing course like last week. So like, there's a correlation between the course and you believing it's everybody, right? But we go through these all the time. And when we learn something new, we tend to see it everywhere. It becomes a bit of a hammer nail situation. Right.
Absolutely. It's like when you buy a new car, suddenly you see that same model car everywhere.
Yeah. And you're like, the guy told me this was unique, which is annoying. And so I find that the workshop, as much as it is going to give very clear direction to vocal coaches, it's going to make them much happier about making a choice. Because let's face it, some very difficult breathing issues or tension issues take months to resolve. And I personally don't feel comfortable embarking on 3 months of hard work for it to be fruitless at the end. The other thing I find is great is buy-in from the clients. Now, bias from my side, I tend to get a lot of people who have been down the road with it with a lot of different people and have not resolved their problem. I get a lot of those people. Sometimes those people are looking for an answer that doesn't exist. Hey, they bounce around hoping someone will say, hey, just do this one thing and everything will be great. And we're all saying, no, it's going to take a lot of work. Right?
Yeah. They want the magic bullet.
Yeah. And it's just like,
those they do bounce around.
Yeah. So we got to be, with the questioning and history taking, we can weed those people out. Right. But actually, genuinely, lots of people have been around the houses and are distraught with it. So in that sense, that's also my motivation, is because I get a lot of those people. I really want them to be able to understand their problem, for me to show them logically from palpation and exercise and lay it out to them clearly that from the logic that even they can understand, that I believe it's this issue, and they trust you, because they might not trust you because everyone else has done it on opinion. And they've gone with the opinion and haven't got anywhere. And now it's 2 years down the line and they've spent about $2,000, right? So that's another really helpful aspect of improving your diagnosis. And that's what the workshops aim to do.
That's great. And then if people want to be kept up to date, because I know we've discussed you doing maybe some digital courses and things, and I don't know if you're comfortable talking about what you may have coming up, but I know you've got some things coming up that singers are going to love, as well as voice teachers. Where's the best place to kind of follow you on that?
Yeah, well, I think the diagnosis situation, a workshop situation, will become a digital product eventually, which would be amazing.
I'm buying that one.
Yeah, mate. Thank you. I'll put you on the testing list, of course.
Great.
Of course. Yeah. But that one
would be great if you create, because I'm sure from this audience, if you get people, if you want to create like a beta test audience for this as you develop it,
it's recommended. Yeah.
And I think so. So people need to follow you so they can hop on that.
Yeah, and they can do that. It's my website is chrisjohnsonvocalcoach.com. At the bottom of the homepage, there's a sign up form at the bottom of the homepage, and I will be keeping everyone up to date across the year. There'll also be that for singers, and I also very passionate about articulation. So, and I've done a few workshops on that can translate to something that works online as well. So that's what's going to be coming up this year. All
right. I want to thank you for being my guest, man.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
This is great information. I mean, honestly, you're one of my favorite voice teachers out there.
Thank you. Much appreciated. Yeah. And yourself, man. We got fond memories, and long may they continue.
Well, I think that went rather well, if I do say so myself. I will be releasing part 2 again this Friday. If you're listening as this podcast is being released, I release on Tuesday. And then I'm going to release part 2 on Friday. And coming up after Chris, very soon, I'm going to have Dr. Reena Gupta, who is a top-level ear, nose, and throat doctor in Los Angeles. More specifically, she's a laryngologist who specializes in professional voice users, aka singers, performers, etc. And she has quite a big celebrity clientele. But what's really refreshing is she doesn't get that I work with celebrities' attitude, which you often get in this business, especially in Los Angeles. She's just really giving, just a wonderful person. So that Rena will be coming up soon. I'm very excited about that interview. If you want to find out more about me, just go to johnhenny.com. You can sign up for my email list. You'll be the first to find out about cool things that I'm doing, new products, even some freebie things I do here and there. And if you're interested in lessons with me, you can also check out the information there. I always love to work with people who listen to the podcast. And until next time, to better singing. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.